Cristina Campos. I am the Director of Community Integrated Services with Family Violence Prevention Services, and I work directly with our Youth Advisory Council. I think it's so important to be here today just to spread awareness. Our goal is prevention and education with regards to any type of violence, but specifically teen dating violence. That's what our council is based on, and we're so excited to have the opportunity to share. I have brought two of our youth council members, Sritha and Isha, and I will allow them to introduce themselves.
Okay, I'm Isha Andy. I'm a sophomore at Healthcare's High School and one of the co-chairs of the Communications and Development Committee of the Youth Advisory Council. And I'm here because this is a topic that isn't talked about as much as it needs to be, and I want to spread awareness about this.
Hi, my name is Shrita. I'm a junior at Holy Cross High School. I'm also a co-chair of the Communication Committee of YAC. I'm here today for the same reason that Isha said. I feel like teen dating violence is not talked about enough, and I feel like we should be able to bring awareness to the topic.
So I wanted to kind of start today's conversation off with someone defining for us what teen dating violence is.
When we think about teen dating violence, many people immediately think of physical violence, but I feel that it's much broader than that. Teen dating violence includes emotional, verbal, psychological, sexual, and digital abuse. Emotional abuse can look like a partner constantly bullying you or making you doubt yourself, often called as gaslighting. Verbal abuse might involve hurtful comments, name calling, or even threats. Psychological abuse is more subtle, in my opinion. Your partner might isolate you from friends or family, or make you feel scared to express your own opinions. Then there's sexual abuse, which can range from pressure to engage in sexual activities to outright assault. And with today's technology, digital abuse has become a huge issue. This could mean monitoring your phone, invading your privacy, or even just using social media to control or humiliate you.
Absolutely. Isha, did you have anything to add to that?
Yes. So the unhealthy behaviors in relationships that Srita mentioned that eventually exhibit this teen dating violence can be normalized by society. From what I've seen so far, teens especially are less likely to recognize if the relationship they're in constitutes as unhealthy because they're first starting to experiment with romance. They're first starting to deepen their current relationships. And it doesn't help that a lot of the movies we have today, like teen rom-coms and social media, actually romanticize a lot of these unhealthy behaviors, like Netflix's new movie, Sierra Burgess is a Loser.
I agree. We talk about this a lot in our Youth Advisory Council. Not only the societal norms that we all experience, right? But just this idea, whether that's gender socialization, that's kind of led to some of these ideas, how it's portrayed within media when you look at music, social media, the type of movies we watch, the books that we read, right? The glamorization, as Isha said, or just the normalization of certain behaviors. Romeo and Juliet, right? This idea that love is dramatic and it's toxic and it's just really difficult for teens to kind of make that distinction between what's healthy and normal and what is unhealthy behaviors that have been normalized.
And I think I want to add to that the idea that it's all so new for teenagers being in relationships, falling in love. These are feelings you've never felt before. So it's easy to get confused with the heightened senses that you have when you're first falling in love versus a sustained relationship, because those emotions don't have to stay so heightened, but it almost feels like it does. And that's where there's wiggle room, there's like cracks for some of these behaviors to get through just to keep it exciting. And
yeah, absolutely.
Does your agency or have current statistics on teen dating violence at all?
We do. So I brought some statistics, looking kind of at the national level, bringing it down to our states, and then also here in Bear County. So if we look nationally, right, the statistics tell us that 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 10 boys under the age of 18 have experienced teen dating violence with regards to physical or sexual abuse. Here in Bear County, that number is even higher. We see that 1 in 3 girls by the age of 18 have already experienced some type of domestic violence or intimate partner violence. Um, a lot of the statistics, Futures Without Violence gives us 68% of people in dating relationships under the age of 18 report educational interference by their partner. 67% report job interference by their dating partner. 65% report psychological abuse or financial control by a dating partner. And 56% discuss online abuse. So, referencing back to that digital abuse that Sritha mentioned earlier. And we know that 1 in 3 homicides perpetrated on girls under the age of 18 are actually by an intimate partner, a dating partner. So those statistics are huge. When we look at youth.gov, they talk to adults who are currently in domestic violence relationships. And one of the things that those adults report, 22% of them first experienced dating or intimate partner violence between the ages of 11 and 17. Another 47% report their first experience with intimate partner violence was between the ages of 18 and 24. So that tells us just about 70% of adults who are experiencing domestic violence, right? This started in adolescence. This started as young as age 11. So if we're not talking about this now, right, if we wait until the end of high school, if we wait until college, we've waited too long. The time to talk about what healthy friendships and relationships look like really is as soon as kids are beginning to form friendships.
I almost don't know what to say. Um, those numbers are way worse than I anticipated them to be. Way
Well,
worse.
and if I can add on to that, at the beginning of this month, Texas Council on Family Violence, which is our state's coalition for domestic violence, they released the Honoring Texas Victims report. This report compiles all of the deaths which have been definitively ruled as domestic violence related for the state. So for the year 2023, we have 205 deaths definitively determined to be a result of domestic violence. Of those 205 deaths, 22 of them were adolescents. The youngest was a young lady who was 15. This young lady was stabbed to death by her boyfriend on her driveway. Her mother found her, and it was too late to render aid. Last year, the number actually, the youngest victim was 13. So, not to be morbid, but to really put it into perspective, um, it's not just the people who are losing their life to violence. But again, it's these 1 in 3 here in Bear County that are actively experiencing it now, like as we're creating this video, right? And so if we're not really engaging in these conversations and working with prevention and education, right, these numbers are going to continue on this trend.
I feel like there is kind of some, I guess, a lack of concern from parents who are in healthy relationships within their family, because we assume that violence in teenage relationships is kind of learned, and the assumption is then that it's happening in their family. And I know that there is a lot of truth to that. However, the reason I wanted to do this was for all parents, because it's not just, hey, violence is kind of a regular occurrence in our life. It's, you might be a very healthy and loving home, and you're still going to have a child that potentially gets into a relationship like this. So I really appreciate knowing what those numbers are.
And I would just suggest domestic violence, intimate partner violence, teen dating violence is not something that is contained within the boundaries of a specific community. It's not just happening at certain schools. We see this across the board. It is regardless of socioeconomic status. It is regardless of gender. It is regardless of sexual orientation. This is something that occurs everywhere. And last year, we had a member of our teen council that did a survey of 100 students at Brandeis High School. A lot of people would consider Brandeis on the more affluent side, part of Northside Independent School District. And the numbers that she came up with in her survey of 100 students suggested that even there, the statistics were definitely higher than the national average. Our council is looking to kind of expand and replicate on this survey currently and look at the different zip codes across San Antonio, look at the different schools and where they're located, and not only determine the experiences around teen dating violence that our youth are having, but also there's a counterpart, a survey for adults, where we're looking to understand, as a parent myself, as an educator, as an advocate, I know what I understand about this topic. We want to ask other adults, other educators, other caregivers, other coaches, youth leaders, anyone in the community. What is your understanding about this? And what we want to see is the youth experience that's actually taking place consistent with what parent thought is? Are parents really understanding? Because again, this is not something that's happening in somebody else's house, right? This is happening to our friends, our family, our neighbors, and the people, that we see every day.
If I'm a parent, what can I look for? What are some red flags or maybe warning signs that would be indicative that my child is involved in an unhealthy relationship, or even that my child is the perpetrator of the violence?
I love that you mentioned perpetrator as well. It's not just enough to look for those red flags and see when something may be happening to our child. It's so important also to acknowledge when our child may be the one perpetrating a behavior that's inappropriate or abusive and provide accountability. So I do want to pass that off to our girls first as teens, right? Whether this is your experiences or experiences of people you know, what are some of those signs that parents should be aware of from your perspective?
Yeah, I can go ahead and start with that. So sometimes the students may show like evidence of depression or just may not be acting the way that they normally are. But I feel like it's more important to recognize how sometimes there may not be warnings at all. You can't visibly see signs sometimes because parents don't know everything that the child is doing, and that's unavoidable. So it's really important that there's a maintained open communication channel between the child and the parents, where the child should feel safe to say whatever they have to say, that there's not going to be any consequences or punishments for needing help and being vulnerable.
I feel like parents should keep an eye on any sudden changes in their teen's behavior. Um, if your normally outgoing child becomes more withdrawn, is constantly anxious, or suddenly doesn't want to see their friends anymore, that's a potential sign that something could be wrong. If they're always checking their phone and seem nervous about messages or calls, or if they even start making excuses for their partner's bad behavior, these could be red flags. And physical signs like unexplained injuries should also raise concern. But let's not forget that perpetrators of dating violence have warning signs too. If you notice your team becoming overly controlling or possessive, maybe they try to dictate who their partner can talk to or what they can wear, that's a serious issue as well. And early intervention can make a big difference. And more on the statistics side of teen dating violence, um, I remember last year at my school, I didn't even know this happened until my counselors, they called us, all in to the cafeteria at our school, and apparently this freshman at the time who was in my midterm class, she ended up committing suicide. For what reason, we don't know. I wasn't that close to her, but that kind of just makes it known that, like, you can't always see warning signs within people. I had no idea that, that would have ever happened. So, that kind of just makes it known that you always have to be on the lookout for not only warning signs, but, like, you also have to make it known to communicate with people, just making sure that they're okay, because you never know when someone is not okay.
Well, I would
So
agree. Sometimes there's obvious visible signs that something is off, something has changed. Definitely the isolation, definitely the changes in the behavior. Sometimes looking at the financial aspect, because that can be something maybe a parent is more connected to when a child is asking for more money or needing something because of that element of that financial or economic control. There's various signs, but at the end of the day, what I've heard both girls say and what I've heard from other council members as well is that communication is so key. Being able to have these discussions open and honest as a parent, being able to step back and check sometimes some of our feelings, our opinions on certain things, and being open to hear first and reserve the reaction, right? Because no parent wants to be that parent that didn't recognize the signs or wondering what could I have done different before my child, began engaging in self-harm or did harm themselves. I think that was an important point, Sritha. Um, whether it's physical violence perpetrated or whether it's a partner suggesting or encouraging someone to hurt themselves, right? We know these are very real parts of domestic violence and teen dating violence.
Something that I was thinking about when y'all were talking about those warning signs is that they really mirror substance use,
Mhm.
and what you would look for with substance use, which is thankfully something that our society is much more open to talking about, and that parents are becoming much more open to realizing that substance use and addiction does not discriminate, and neither does violence. But I heard a lot of those same things: isolation, rapid changes in behavior, um, poor performance in school. And I think also something that I see with our students is with isolation, you might miss it because you see that your child is always with somebody, but they're always with that one person. So all of their other friends have kind of fallen to the wayside and it's just become that one person. So we don't think about isolation, but that's exactly what isolation is, right? That they pull
Absolutely.
the child, they pull the other person away from everyone that matters.
Pulling them away from friends, pulling them away from family, making it difficult for them. Maybe they have a part-time job, they're not able to maintain it. Maybe they used to belong to different activities, clubs, sports, and they're not interested in that anymore, right? Or making excuses for why they can't or don't want to participate. That is that isolation aspect, and it's definitely huge.
And something else that I have noticed is that there's a change in the way girls in particular will dress when they are in a relationship that is unhealthy. So it starts off with looking our best, makeup, nails, whatever, cute outfits. And when they are moving into a relationship that's toxic, unhealthy, violent, whatever the term you'd like to use, I've noticed less care and concern being put into what they look like, which I do you have an explanation for that you can think of?
I think that with both adults and adolescents involved in teen dating violence or intimate partner violence relationships, the important thing to remember is that it's based on power and control. The need to have power and control over the other individual. And a lot of times that does extend to how you present yourself, how you look. This idea, this that jealousy, right, is it's because I love you. It's not because of you, it's because that person flirts with you or you get more attention. And it just, it makes me feel so bad, and so I need you to alter or change who you're hanging out with, how you're dressing, you're wearing too much makeup, right? So it's this element of control, and it's really insidious. What we see is it begins to break down a person's sense of self-esteem, their sense of self-worth, their idea of who they are, because bit by bit, they're being encouraged and coerced into changing who they are in order to make the other person that they're in a relationship with comfortable, to make them happy, to make them pleased. But there's no limit to that, right? After I have changed my hair, now I'm needing to change my clothes. Now I'm needing to maybe not do that job anymore because, it's just taking up too much time. Or why would I want to be with my family in the evening, right? When I could be talking to you, right? So it's just, it bit by bit takes over a person. And to reference back to what you said earlier, I want to draw another similarity between substance use and abusive relationships. The same way that we see many of the same warning signs, the red flags, we also see a pattern in people trying to end abusive relationships that's very similar to people trying to
Mm.
quit using a substance, right? Um, there's this idea of like within the substance use community, right, around recovery, and that it takes 7 to 8 times to kind of quit a substance and work on recovery concepts in order to become clean and sober. And then it's like a lifelong thing that you're trying to maintain. Very similar numbers within domestic violence. And it would be really interesting to study with that within teen dating violence, but it tracks this idea that you try to break up with a partner and that partner is trying to convince you to come back with them because now they've lost power and control. We talk about it as the cycle of violence, right? There's this period of excitement and love, the honeymoon period, things are great. And then there's some tension building and there's some form of explosion that could be verbal abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, humiliating someone in front of somebody, right? But then it's, I'm so sorry, please don't leave me, I will change. I'll do what you need me to do. Or it can even look like, I can't survive without you. I'm going to kill myself, right? These tactics, these manipulative and coercive actions that are very intentional on the part of the person choosing violence to get you to come back. And once you do, we see the cycle begin to repeat. And so, just like with substance use, if you have a child, if you have a friend who is trying to leave an unhealthy relationship, they're going to require that long-term support to be able to anticipate this cycle and how it's going to impact them and support them as they are trying to leave and understand, right, that I'm sorry, it's never going to happen again is very unusual for that to be true.
Mm. And it's not hopeless. It's
No,
just really hard.
really hard.
Yeah.
Really hard. And absolutely. And I think Sritha may have said it earlier. The sooner this cycle is interrupted, right? The sooner we're aware of these red flags, the more support that we have, the better chances that somebody is going to be able to make a healthy decision and take the steps they need to seek a healthier, more supportive relationship.
Recognizing is the first step to anything. You have to know that it's happening. So knowing what the cycle of violence looks like is the first step. And parents out there should know it as well so that they can be looking for it. One of the things that I thought was really important for our parents to know is how to reinforce, or what reinforcing healthy, safe relationships looks like. How do we do that?
Girls, do you have any thoughts on that? From the
I
perspective
can
of
start.
adolescent?
A healthy relationship is, I feel like it's built on mutual respect, trust, and communication. Um, I feel that partners should support each other, feel comfortable expressing their boundaries, and have a sense of equality, especially with boundaries, because setting up clear boundaries in your relationship makes everything a lot more easier. If you don't set up boundaries in your relationship, sometimes your partner can bleed through the lines, and it's hard to kind of reinforce them in the middle of your relationship. Respect is also one of them. Respect means um, valuing each other's independence. No one should feel controlled or manipulated. Healthy communication is also very key. Teens need to feel safe talking about their feelings without judgment or retaliation. Relationships can fall on a spectrum, though. Some might start healthy but become unhealthy if one partner becomes controlling, jealous, or disrespectful. And I feel that it's important to recognize those early warning signs before things spiral into abuse. So, healthy relationships are all about support, not control.
Yeah. Isha?
Yeah, definitely. And to add on to what Srita said, parents should be able to exhibit this open communication and set boundaries for their child so their children know how to set boundaries for themselves when the time comes in romantic relationships. It's also a lot about developing confidence in the child through setting good expectations for them, through constantly telling them how proud they are of their children, through positive affirmations. So these children eventually gain this confidence in themselves to be able to establish these boundaries and this communication in their own relationships, romantic or not.
I agree wholeheartedly. The more we can, as parents and educators and other involved adults, the more that we can instill a sense of self worth in our students and our kids, the more that we can encourage them in understanding who they are and how unique and special they are, and really giving them that gift of self respect. When someone has respect for their self, it's a lot easier to see when those boundaries are being crossed, when someone is exhibiting, right? I love me so well. I'm not going to let you not love me that well, too. The girls and I were talking about this last week. This personal story as a parent. I know what I know from where I work and what I do with youth council. But as a parent, I have a 14-year-old daughter who does have her first boyfriend, and I will let all names and situations be anonymous. But I was checking in with her and I saw some communication on her phone, and the communication was going into a place that looked a little bit unhealthy to me. And some comments were being made, some sexually suggestive comments were being made to her. And I immediately saw the way she was responding change. And when that happened, my thought was, wow, she's seeing this. She's not really knowing how to respond, or she may be feeling uncomfortable. And as a parent, my first thought was, I'm going to call this boy's mom. We're going to talk about this. I'm going to take this phone away. And I had to stop and say, that's not me empowering my child to make a healthy decision or to empower her to feel capable of creating and enforcing a boundary. As much as I want to protect, as much as I want to be a mama bear, I also have to stop and say, hey, let's talk about this. And so that's what I did. I said, hey, I noticed this. Tell me about this conversation. I saw some red flags. I saw some green flags. What do you see going on here? And her response was, yeah, I think there's love bombing and he's moving too fast. And I said, you do? What made you feel that way? And she proceeded to tell me. And I said, does he know you feel that way? And she said, well, not really. And I said, why not? And she said, well, I don't know what to say. And I said, well, you've spoken it very beautifully to me. Why don't you share that with him? Because in a healthy relationship, right, it doesn't mean that we may not ever have disagreements or arguments. It doesn't mean that we may not feel uncomfortable at times. What it means is we have the agency within ourselves to communicate those things and to draw a boundary, right? And so I said, if you tell him what's the worst thing that can happen, he might laugh at you. He might become angry with you. He might be dismissive. But if he does any of those things, then you've seen where his respect for you ends, right? Because he's not taking into consideration what you're saying. On the other hand, you may see him apologize or say, "Oh, I'm sorry. Like, I didn't know that made you feel that way." Or, "Oh, I was just messing around. I won't do that." And then what comes next? If we see a change in behavior, if we see that he backs off in that regard, he's heard you. You've been heard. You've communicated a boundary. Now you can be proud of yourself. And if that doesn't happen, you have choices to make. And I'll be here to help you if you need to do that, but I want to empower you to make that choice, right? So trying to again go back, empower, give that sense of authority, give the belief, right? Having that belief in our child that they're capable of making the decisions is always going to go so far in them also believing that they are capable and able to do these things as well.
Boundaries is one of my all-time favorite words. I love boundaries. And one of my favorite books on the topic is Set Boundaries, Find Peace by Nedra Tawwab. She also has an awesome Instagram page. She's all kinds of fabulous. But one of the things that she said in her book is that boundaries protect relationships.
Yes.
And I think that's so powerful that
Yeah.
you feel it's counterintuitive. If I draw a line in the sand and say, don't cross this, then I'm going to upset you and I'm ruining the relationship. But really, it is a cue to the other person for how you want to be treated.
Yes.
So it's not drawing a line that, we've got problems now and you can't do this and I'm being bossy. It's more just, this is how I want to be treated. And within this context, when we're talking about teens, sometimes parents might think, okay, I can do boundaries. We might realize, oh, I'm not actually great with boundaries.
Yeah.
And one more thing about boundaries and parents, well, even with individuals, it doesn't matter. When we put a boundary in place, so if a parent says to their teen, we are going to put the phone away during dinner. Nobody's going to have their phone on the table. Like, you will survive for an hour for dinner. We're going to be fine. We get all kinds of different reactions from putting a boundary in place. Somebody might push back. They might question. They might rationalize why their way is better.
They might refuse.
They might
outright
refuse. Yeah. So, all the way down to acceptance, right? Okay, I get the boundary. But for us, it's really important for anybody to realize that when someone is responding to my boundary, I have to learn how to deal with that. I still have to hold the boundary because that is honestly the hardest part about boundaries is holding them. So with our teens, if I'm trying to help them hold a boundary with their significant other, they're not going to be happy about it, probably, because for instance, they're having a lot of anxiety that if I'm not available at all times to this person when they're trying to text me because my mom told me to put my phone away, you're going to get a lot of emotional reaction. But that's where we have room for conversation. We can say, I see you're really upset. I'm confused as to why, because you might not know why they're having an absolute cow about putting their phone away for an hour. And that's where that room for conversation happens.
I would agree. And I would say two things. One, validating that person's feelings, your teen's feelings. I may not agree with you, and I understand why this is hard. And you may not believe me that I understand, but I do understand, and really trying to be empathetic about that. And at the same time, holding that boundary, you are essentially modeling what you are asking them to do. If I create a boundary that I can't hold because you were upset that I wanted you to put your phone away, how do I expect you to then create a boundary and hold it with your friend or your significant other? So now I have to model this as hard as it is. And the way I react to you, my teen, has to be in an appropriate way. So that teen is learning, right, how to respond to others when their boundaries are violated. And that's the tricky thing about boundaries. It's not just my boundary, it's the other person's boundary as well. Recognizing when that person doesn't have good boundaries or being respectful. I want people to respect my boundaries. I also have to be able to respect theirs. I have to be able to recognize theirs in order to respect it. And that's a skill in itself. So when we talk about not just the victim or survivor of teen dating violence, the person who is experiencing it, we're also looking at the person perpetrating it. They have boundaries as well. They expect their boundaries to be respected. We also are inviting them to learn and start understanding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Someone else has set a boundary.
So much power rests in how we model things for our kids. That if I'm holding good boundaries with people, then I can teach you how to do that. And if I'm realizing that I need to teach you and I need to learn, then we're going to do it together. Because there's no shame in that. We're all humans. We've talked a lot about confidence, but I think I want to, on the flip side, say that self esteem seems to be a big part of teen dating violence on both parties. So
oh,
the
absolutely.
victim and the perpetrator, is that accurate?
I mean, adolescents are in a developmental stage, right, where they are learning to become who they're going to become. And there is a lot of self doubt. There is a lot of peer pressure. There's a lot of fear around judgment or acceptance within your peer group, right? And also that weird stage of I'm not a child, but I'm not an adult, right? And so I'm kind of pulled between the expectations from my home or my family and the expectations of my peers and who I'm trying to become. And so um, I would absolutely agree with that. And I would think that, um, again, being able to support our adolescents as they navigate this journey and have these discussions with them is so essential. Looking at ways we can support our teens as they're grappling with who they are and the kind of choices they're making. And that comes back to a lot of accountability, right? And also instilling in them the opportunity to take accountability personally. Um, as a community, as a society, that's something we may not always be the best at. Um, and so exploring those ways that, feeling comfortable calling out a friend, calling out somebody, a partner, when you see something that makes you uncomfortable or that you notice that something may be a bit off, I think that's very valid. Back to the boundaries and the statement that you made earlier. These aren't isolated skills or tools that we're hoping our adolescents use. If I can develop good boundaries in a dating relationship, how does that transfer over with my friends when it comes to peer pressure and being involved in maybe going somewhere or doing something I shouldn't do, right? That could be risky or harmful. When I'm having my first job and my boss is expecting something of me that he shouldn't or she shouldn't, perhaps, right? Or a coworker that is kind of infringing on my rights, but I'm new here. And so I'm kind of trying to fit in and go along with it. Even in school, right? We know that there can be situations, whether it's teachers, coaches, anyone else, we want our adolescents to be able to create boundaries and use them. And I agree with you as adults, as parents, we have to be able to take a real close look at ourselves and how we do that, whether that is within our own home and our own family, in intimate relationships with other family members. The dynamics between parents and grandparents sometimes comes into play. But what does it look like when our boss calls, after hours and we're trying to engage with that, or there's a demand from a friend or, a group that we're a part of, right? So it's
It's
all
and
connected.
boundaries, yeah, boundaries have been hard to maintain since cell phones were created. Well, also since email, because I'm old enough that I remember when email wasn't in existence, which is crazy. But those two things have kind of really blurred the lines of boundaries. So I think about having a job, like working in a space where email wasn't part of it. All information has to wait till tomorrow morning.
Mhm.
Like, unless they call me on the phone to tell me that this thing happened at work, everything has to wait until tomorrow when I come in and these people are lined up ready to talk to me. What a difference email makes. At 2 a.m, somebody can email you and say, I need you right now. But in terms of relationships, because that's boundaries at the workplace, but relationships, texting and cell
And
phones, and
accessibility.
yes, 24/7 accessibility. So as parents, there can be some boundaries that you put in place with your children around cell phone usage, around plug your phone in outside, give me your phone at night. Um, and I'm thinking that that would be a way to maybe intervene when you see your child struggling, but I would be curious to know if there are other ways to intervene, what resources might be available for families and teens that find themselves in this situation.
Absolutely. Girls, what do you think? As
So I can
teens,
start with
right? It's hard as a parent. It's like, I'm going to do this thing and it's going to work. From your perspectives, what works? What works?
So there's a lot of resources out there for teens because we do understand that parents might not feel comfortable sometimes talking about this. They might not understand the true gravity of the problem, or they just don't know what resources are out there. So there's organizations like Love is Respect
Mm,
or shameless plug for us. And then if you're looking for a local resource, there's our Youth Advisory Council. We definitely do want to talk with teens who need to talk, who want to understand what resources there are and want to know how they could come and exhibit healthy behavior in their relationships.
I do want to add on to that. Intervention can be tricky because confronting an abusive partner directly can
mm,
escalate the situation. I feel the best approach is often to talk privately with the victim, offer them support without judgment, and let them know that they deserve a relationship where they feel safe and respected. I also feel that it's important not to pressure them as they might not be ready to leave the relationship yet. Teens also need to know their rights, like they have the right to set boundaries and that they should expect those boundaries to be respected. Um, I feel that schools often have policies in place for dealing with harassment, and I feel that many schools also have counselors trained to help teens in these situations as well. I feel that people should have a safe base at home so that they have like a trusted adult or just anybody that they know that can be there for them whenever they need help. Legal protections, such as protective orders, are available in many states for teens who are experiencing abuse. As for resources, there's the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and like Isha mentioned, loveisrespect.org, and they offer confidential advice and support.
Y'all
And
shared so much great information. At the most basic level, the best intervention is prevention, right? Having these conversations from the time your children are able to start talking, right? What do healthy friendships look like? What would a good friend do? What makes somebody maybe not the best choice of friends? And carrying that conversation on into adolescence and when people are starting to engage in romantic relationships, modeling like we discussed, being not being afraid as an adult to say, "Hey, I made a mistake," or, "Hey, this is a situation I was in and this is how it ended up." Being realistic about how we also make mistakes and making that space to, it's okay to make a mistake. Let's work together to fix this and move forward. So I agree that communication and that foundation at home, but even as a parent, we can't do it all. One of the biggest resiliency factors we see and protective factors is having other safe, healthy adults that can be role models in somebody's life. That could be a teacher, it could be a coach, it could be a counselor, it could be somebody in your faith-based community. Connecting, right, to other people. We need to build networks, know not just who your child is dating, but who are their friends, right? Who are their friends' parents? What do those homes look like, right? Building this network and this community outwards. And when things go wrong, not being afraid to be there and support, but to also go to the schools and have conversations. If you feel like something hasn't adequately been dealt with, what are the legal protections? I think that was mentioned as well. The legal resources that we can have around harassment, sexual assault, right? Any type of inappropriate online conduct, right, that can be documented, that sort of thing. Very, very important. And if you go to one of the sites that was mentioned, Love is Respect, for instance, they have actual like dialogue, like conversation starters, like how to talk to your teen, right? If you feel uncomfortable. Back to that shameless plug, right? Talking to someone like us at Family Violence Prevention Services or within our Youth Advisory Council to help maybe find the footing for how to have these conversations and discussions. And this could be from an adult perspective. This could also be youth to youth, because what we hear from a lot of students is, I did try talking to a counselor. I did try telling my mom or my dad, and it didn't necessarily help. That's not every home, but it's many homes. And being humble enough to recognize we don't always have the answers as parents, and we do need that support. So reaching out and just again letting your child know that they are so loved and so valuable and so important, that even if the first or the second or the third thing we try doesn't work, we will keep working and it will get better. And we can help you make healthy choices for yourself and feel safe and loved.
That is incredibly helpful information. And I want to add on to that um, the notion of reacting versus responding. And that's a big part of it. If I know that I'm going to have some kind of an emotional reaction to what my child is going to say, then I, as a parent, need to find a way to rein that in, deal with my feelings so that I can then respond in an appropriate manner. In order to make a safe space for our kids to talk to us, we do have to respond and not react. So if I'm going to have some kind of emotional reaction, take a break. One of my favorite strategies is to just say, okay. That's all I can muster is just okay. And let me think on that, and we'll talk in a little bit. And that gives you a lot of time to do what you need to do, get your blood pressure back down, your heart rate back down, and then come back and say, okay, you told me a lot, and I want to try and help from here. Because when we're reacting, our emotions take over. Our brain goes offline, and we are now at the mercy of our feelings, and we might say things that later, that was not helpful. That made my kid feel bad, instead of, thank you for telling me. I'm so sorry that you're going through this, and I got you. We're going to figure this out together.
Regardless of your relationship as an adult, when we react with big emotions to our kids' big emotions, we are many times just throwing fire on, fuel onto that fire.
Mm-hmm.
And so I agree with you that our reactions are so important. And that doesn't mean it's not hard. It means being prepared for those conversations, or being prepared to step away when you might need a minute or an hour or a couple days to be ready to re-engage. So there's no shame in that, I would definitely say.
If I have a student that I know is in an unhealthy or violent relationship, is the Youth Advisory Council available for her or him to reach out and just connect?
I can start. So I feel that the Youth Advisory Council is an incredible opportunity for young people to take a leadership role in shaping the way that their peers understand relationships. And by giving teens a voice, we're helping them to recognize the importance of healthy relationship dynamics. These councils are all about education and empowerment, which is like helping teens to spot the signs of abuse early on, but also encouraging them to model healthy behavior in their own relationships. And it's not just about romantic relationships either. It's about fostering respectful, supportive friendships. And council members can design workshops, launch awareness campaigns, and even act as mentors to others, all while building leadership skills. And I feel it's a proactive way to create a safer, healthier environment for everyone. And um, anyone can join. It's open to anybody. We're all about diversity, and that's the main part of Youth Advisory Council.
Yeah, and to build up on that, it's definitely a different experience when you're reading it or talking with a counselor than actually face to face having a conversation with a teen who understands what you're going through, who understands the gravity of this type of problem and how you can go forth with it. So, apart from like all the leadership opportunities and things that we do provide, we are definitely here to talk and to help spread awareness and information regarding teen dating violence and healthy relationships.
That's great.
Yeah, it's twofold, right? We want to be a resource for the community, someone who's experiencing violence or knows somebody who's experiencing violence can reach out and receive support. Someone who's interested in learning more or being part of the conversation and pushing, this idea of healthy friendships and relationships in the community, come join. We are open to middle school, high school. We have college students that have been participating and acting as mentors. And this is a youth-driven organization, right? We want to be a support to the community and be actively engaged in the community. You definitely don't have to join to receive any type of support or resources. We also have opportunities for education coming up in November and December. We've got educational online workshops, 20 to 30 minutes each, 6 times a month that people can join in and just kind of learn and explore different topics around teen dating violence and healthy friendships and relationships. It's free to come in and join. You can share it with friends, have other people join on. What a great resource for a parent to do with a teen. It's a great conversation starter. So that is fun. We also have our survey that I mentioned earlier, both for adolescents as well as adults who have an adolescent in their life. Even just by taking a survey, that can start dialogue with your adolescent. It can give you ideas for what to look for, what to discuss. But honestly, just living life. You pass a billboard on the street about sex trafficking, that starts a conversation. You see a commercial, you hear a song. I love this song. It's a bop. It's also really, really not an example of a good relationship. What do you think? Right? And it's just fun. It's just fun. This is everything. This is implicit to everything we do as a parent. This is just an extension of how we cared and engaged with our students. Sometimes there's this idea, right? Our kids need us when they're little. Our kids need us just as much through adolescence and into young adulthood, right? And we can't sometimes, I've got a break. They're on their own. They're busy with their phone, right? We still need to be engaged. So, Catherine, I love what you said as well about taking time to put the phone away. Maybe that's during meal times, no phones during meals, right? Keeping that connection and reminding your teens how important it is to still have friends and activities outside of relationships, still make space and an intention for family time and staying connected so that your teen's worth isn't entirely now built around this one relationship. Because when that starts to crumble, they lose everything. But if they have this wide support system, right, they are still connected and they have so much more to engage in and fall back on when they're struggling with a relationship.
Wow, if their worth is wrapped up in that other person, I think that sums up
Completely.
teen dating violence really well. Because the word validation comes to mind as well, that we get a lot of validation from other people, especially as teenagers, because your friends, your peers are way more important to you than the adults. We love our parents, we love the adults in our life, but our friends are so important. And if I feel like this person loves me so much, I'm going to do what I can to hold on to that. But when love turns into control, it's not love anymore.
I think back to that idea, you have to be able to love yourself before you can love anybody else. And that's a work in progress, even for adults, right? But being able to find your self-worth from who you are inside and out prior to having that so entirely wrapped up into a person you're talking to or dating, right, is essential.
Is there anything else y'all want to add?
I did want to add on to warning signs. I just realized this when we were talking about it. I wanted to talk about the recent death of Liam Payne, one of my favorite singers. He was part of the boy band One Direction. But for reference, if nobody knows what happened to him, he actually jumped off a balcony in a hotel in Argentina. I wanted to talk about warning signs in him because especially on TikTok, a lot of what I saw was that everybody started to realize that, oh, we saw like that so much was happening behind the scenes, but nobody realized it. And with the fame of a singer, he has a target behind his back, right? People would bully him, make fun of him, just say really hurtful and nasty things that people shouldn't be saying. And also personal life too. With all of those factors being put into place, I just felt really bad that he had to turn to substance abuse to relieve his pain. And because of that, he committed suicide. And I just wanted to add that, you know, you can't always see the signs and you just always have to be there for, anyone who's going through that. I just wanted to throw that in there.
No, but to make a connection to that, because what I've heard, not just from the two of you, but from some of our other council members as well, and just working with the council, blame and the way people respond. We've talked about this whole conversation primarily from the idea of the two people in a relationship and a parent, right? And maybe we've talked about friends that could be supportive or point out red flags or, whatever. But there's also all of the other adolescents in this picture, right? So to speak on what you said, Streetha, when you have people in the hallways making fun of you because they see how this person is controlling you, right? Or there's an altercation that happens and then people are videoing it and sharing it around to other people, right? We have to take it into account. This is not a vacuum in which a youth is creating or making a decision. It is all of these factors and voices. And what you just said is so true. Whether it's something that's being said to their face or behind their back, most definitely it's being perpetrated on social media through text, through different things, right? That matters too. And that is something that is impacting their ability to make healthy, safe choices for themselves. Because your mind, you're in a state of trauma and your mind isn't processing in a linear logical fashion, right? So parents, we have to understand that too. All of the peer and societal pressure that our children are experiencing on top of this teen dating violence relationship or potential teen dating violence relationship. And it may not be your student, it may not be your child, it may be their best friend, it may be the person next door, it may be your niece or nephew. This is valuable for everyone, right? Because we will be connected in one way or another to somebody experiencing this.
Mm-hmm. On that particular topic, there's so many different ways we could look at it. But I would say empathy is a big piece of the puzzle. So if you are a friend and you're looking at your best friend's relationship and they just have a smile on their face and they're saying everything is okay, but you can see the details of their relationship, put yourself in their shoes and think, okay, if that was happening to me, would it be okay? Would that, maybe they're not speaking up. Maybe I can help. Maybe I can ask questions. And the same goes for parents. We can't always trust, unfortunately, because people learn how to live in denial and people learn how to compartmentalize their feelings, put them in a box and pretend like they're not happening. And so we can't always trust that our teens are okay when they say that they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so learning how to bring those topics up is important. And one other thing I wanted to say is, I don't know if I can make this very clear and concise, but our world is very different than it was a long time ago, because many, many decades ago, we lived in communities were all intertwined and people were helping each other, and we're very siloed now as families. So when you're talking about we have people out there around us that can support, it might not feel normal it might feel awkward to think that the neighbor could ask a question or intervene, or a friend could say something, because we really do stay to ourselves very much. But I think it's important that we go back to how we're actually designed, because humans are social creatures. So
Yes.
living in silos isn't actually to our benefit, really. Um, the
Creating
phrase,
connection has to be intentional.
right?
We
It takes a village, as they say.
and encouraging our teens in that and fostering it and facilitating it has to be intentional.
Absolutely. Well, I am so grateful for your time. Does anybody have anything else they want to add?
Yes, I would like to add
Excellent.
something. So, without intentional actions to foster this networks, that is the reason why we have chapters and resources for teens to develop YAC chapters in their school. So they could actually help foster this environment and bring awareness and information to teens that we can't reach directly. So if you parents have children that are interested in doing this as a service project, then of course, please just let us know.
Oh, I love that. Okay, great. Thank you.
Unfortunately, our school districts are working under state laws that don't necessarily support um, outright and direct education and prevention efforts for things like sexual assault and teen dating violence and family violence. There are a lot of like loopholes to how that can be facilitated. And so one of the things we've found is while we may not be able to be active in every school as youth advisory councils, students who are able to start clubs, right? Starting a chapter of YAC within a school is definitely an option. And it's a way to, yeah, just bring together a group of like minded, hopefully, students that want to really advocate around healthy friendships and relationships and provide support and resources and connect back to a bigger group and a bigger community and build that.
And
Right.
you've said it a few times tonight, but I think it's remembering it's not just about our romantic relationships, it's
Mhm.
about our relationships. So we can have these unhealthy relationships with friends too.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
looking at our elementary parents, this is a window of opportunity to really talk about what healthy relationships look like. Friendships, starting with our friendships.
It is. And when you look at the age where our students are beginning to engage in dating relationships, right? My son was in fourth grade when I first found out he was dating someone. What does that look like? Well, we walk to library together and we spend time at recess. Okay. Again, it is never too early to talk about what good friends do, that we're respectful, that we give space, that we are kind, we help, we share, we listen, right? And those are skills that are essential for any point or age or stage in life.
That's great.
Um, and another thing that I think some of our council members brought up, the tendency, maybe without even realizing it, that parents sometimes blame the victim, blame either the student, their child themselves, if they're experiencing an abusive relationship, or in context of, they're someone's friend. Well, if she didn't dress like that, if she hadn't done X, Y, or Z, we hear that a lot. And that mirrors what we see in adult domestic violence relationships. Victim blaming is not the answer. If you haven't walked in that person's shoes, Kat, I think you said that a few minutes ago, in that sense of if we haven't put ourselves into that person's position, we may have no idea what they're going through or how they've attempted or what they've tried to do, what they've been coerced or so we have to be very careful before assigning blame or shame because that keeps somebody locked in this cycle. And it's also going to reiterate what that person perpetrating violence is trying to do, which is isolate, which is to lower one's self-esteem. It's counterproductive to trying to support somebody when we shame or blame someone who's experiencing violence.
Else, I just want to say thank you so much for your time and your incredible knowledge. I've done these videos before on other topics. I just feel like we could talk so much longer on this one. I really do. There's just so much about teen dating violence that we don't know, that we should know, and then the various ways that we can help. So I appreciate all of you very much. I appreciate knowing that there's a youth advisory council, and who knows, maybe there'll be a chapter at Alamo Heights one day. And I just thank you so much.